Hello members of CBS, this is Jeff Choi.
And I'm Suji Song.
And this is the Blop Show. Today, we'll cover the regions North America from 1750 to 1950, focusing on the US. Yep, sorry Canada, and the Caribbeans.
Today, we'll be exploring through the following topics.
The American Revolution, the Manifest Destiny, the Civil War, the Industrial Revolution, and finally the continuing exchanges.
Yes, the American Revolution.
But before we start on the topic of the American Revolution, we'd like to give a bit of background information. The French and Indian War was a war where the French and the Canadians fought against the British colonies and conquest for land.
The result was the split of the land. The French had all the land in between Louisiana west of the Mississippi River. The Spanish had the control over Florida, and the British had the land in the region that eventually came to be the 13 colonies.
Since the war had been so expensive, the British decided to tax the American citizens who at the moment resided in new colonies all of the money needed from the French and Indian War. One of the first acts to be passed was the Stamp Act.
The Stamp Act was an act passed in 1765 where a tax was put onto any sort of papers like playing cards, documents, newspaper, etc.
This enraged people not because the taxation was expensive, but because it showed how little control the Americans had over their own land, meaning that they had no representation inside the parliament that they had passed the acts.
As a result, people started boycotting and sold a product that had a Stamp Act applied to it. The result? More Act.
You see, whenever the people of the colonies started to boycott the products of the British government only thought of other methods to tax the colonists. The outcome was the Townshend Act of 1767.
The purpose of the Townshend Act was to raise revenue in the colonies to pay the salaries of the governors and judges so that they would be independent of colonial rule, to create more effective means of enforcing compliance with the trade regulations.
But wait, there's more. The Boston Massacre in 1770s, despite the fact that it wasn't really a massacre, had resulted with British soldiers open firing on civilians, resulting with 5 dead and 6 injured.
All in all, the American Revolution basically started with the excessive taxing done by the British. The stress of the colonists only grew until one day the string snapped. Despite the triumph of the Americans, there was a major negative outcome of the war. First, there was a huge debt that was to be paid for the war. Ignorantly enough, the French, under the control of Louis XVI, was forced to pay the debt, eventually leading to the French Revolution. Also, it had messed up the whole world economy. That was because America was a major trading factor to many other regions all around the globe. Now that it was independent, alliances changed and economy changed too. The major outcome was its message to society. The fact that such a small society such as the colonies was able to defeat such a large and acclaimed country was a shocking truth to pretty much everyone all around the world. The result was a spark for many others. It sparked many rebellions with people saying, if the Americans can do it, then so can we.
To take a look in the historical context, before American Revolution started, French and Haitian Revolution happened. About the similar time period, French and Haitian Revolution encouraged Americans to do their own revolution, trying to ban British from controlling them. Declaration of Independence was written in 1776, July 4th, which as we all know as the Independence Day. The Declaration was drafted by Thomas Jefferson and it became the nation's most cherished symbol of liberty. In addition, U.S. Constitution, which is the supreme law, was created in 1787. The first 3 articles of the Constitution established the rules and separate power of the 3 branches of the federal government. Other articles express as details the method of amending or changing the Constitution as well as concerns of the United States itself. Also, there are 27 amendments and the first 10 of them are known as the Bill of Rights. The Constitution is one of the great changes in the history, establishing branches of government and organizing without king, which is different than Britain. Also, it is such a progress making a firm, detailed constitution to set their principles in governing the state. This really sets a great example as an independent nation, not relying on old principles from England.
Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, had arranged the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, a trade with the French in return for $15 million, a huge chunk of land. The Louisiana Purchase stretched from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains, all the way to Canada, even to New Orleans. It practically doubled the size of the United States. The westward expansion, commonly known as Manifest Destiny, was known for the Oregon Trail, a route that connected Missouri to Oregon City with the length of 2,000 miles, which was used by a great number of 400,000 settlers. It was for people in search of a new life, but it was a risky game that they all played. The reason was because of how hard it was. Crucial supplies like animals, water, food, medical attention was always brought along with the trip. However, water always dried out. There were never a really surplus of food on a food trip, and a serious injury was pretty much impossible to cure. Animals always died, either of diseases or they were eaten from hunger. And there were always Indians who stole food or even killed at times. Despite the fact that it was a risky game to play, people still went on the trip because that's how bad they wanted to start a new life. We'll be back after the short break. And we're back. Hey, you're not supposed to be here. Get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. And we're back.
The American Civil War was a war between states and, generally speaking, the South and the North. It was fought from 1861 to 1864, and the war began when Confederate warships bombarded Union soldiers at Fort Sumter.
The war ended when Robert E. Lee surrendered the last major Confederate army to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The last battle was fought at Palmito Ranch, Texas. The result of the war was Northern armies winning the victory.
The cause of the Civil War is rather complicated than it seems. One is economic and social differences between the North and the South, and bringing great tensions between them. One example is the cotton industry. Ali Whitney invented cotton gin in 1793, and cotton became one of the profitable products.
Concurrently, number of plantations moved from other crops to cotton, resulting in recruitment of cheap laborers. The South became a one-crop economy depending on slavery.
On the other hand, Northern economy was dependent more on industries than agriculture. The North and the South had different economic attitudes. As a result, while the North focused on city life, the South still held on to traditional social order.
This fight between slave and non-slave states caused a civil war and growth of abolition movements. The northern people gradually grew against slavery and sympathized abolitionists to go against slaveholders.
Since the Revolution, there were two types of groups, which were one that argued for greater states' rights and other who argued for greater federal government control.
The U.S. organized confederation with weak federal governments. The secretly created Constitutional Convention, as known as the U.S. Constitution. Strong proponents of states' rights, such as Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry, were not present at the meeting. Many felt that the new Constitution ignored the rights of the states. The federal government denied states' right to rule federal acts.
The fatalities rate was about 620,000 soldiers died from battles, accidents, starvation, and disease during the war, but recent study claims that the fatalities rate was high as 850,000. Compared to other wars in America, roughly 1,264,000 American soldiers have died in the nation's war, and 620,000 in Civil War, and 644,000 in all other conflicts.
Furthermore, the result of the war was, as described before, lots of casualties in the victory of the North. Just one quick note that although we divided the side by North and the South, some states didn't necessarily follow that.
The transition from the agricultural-based society to industrial economy took more than a century in the US, but long development began from the 1790s to the 1830s.
It began in Britain during the mid-18th century, but the American colonies were behind the mother country because of the abundance in land and scarcity of labor.
Industrialization marked a shift to powered special-purpose machinery, factories, and mass production. The iron and textile industries, along with the development of steam engines, played central roles in the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution improved transportation systems, communication, and banking system as well.
The Industrial Revolution is important in US history as well as relating to the world history because it led them to manufacture more products as well as new products. Also, this led for huge development in US economy, further improving them in global scales and expanding international markets.
The Industrial Revolution, although it improved the US economy and their position on the globe, due to factories and machines, it created air pollution. Until now, due to the pollution and contaminations, many global agendas are related to protecting the environment.
Thus, child labor increased due to industrialization as well as for women. This is because the labor for factories lacked physical labor, meaning children and women as well as immigrants were given more opportunities to work in factories. It is true that industrialization gave them a lot of opportunities to work, however it also hurt them with a horrible condition.
The invention and development of steam engines and machines could be initial stage of Industrial Revolution. Later on, in the early 1900s, Henry Ford was sensational in history of industrialization. He developed moving assembly line technology of mass production, in which parts are added to a product in a sequential manner to create a finished product much faster than handcrafting method.
Not only technologies, but Ford was an ideal industrialist who raised workers' wages to $5 per day. Also, he surpassed his initial goal, which was producing motor cars for a great multitude, which was very expensive and custom-made in earlier eras. He went furthermore, trying to make affordable cars for everyone and adopting countless numbers of their other industries.
Compared to continuities, there were many changes than continuities. The time period from 1750 to 1950 was the era of great changes. For changes during 1800s to 1850, where females were allowed to receive an education in America, they got to participate in academic and literary organizations.
During the Industrial Revolution, women that were married were expected to stay home to tend to the children and to take care of the house. But on the other hand, a lot of women were given a lot of opportunities as well due to the Industrial Revolution. Also, during the World War I, females' roles grew to the need of replacing the workers in factories. And most importantly, in 1920, females were allowed to vote.
Entering World War changed U.S. status in the globe, and their independence was a great change as well. The Industrial Revolution also allowed the U.S. to elevate their economic status as well as more manufactured goods to be produced.
Throughout history, females tend to have lower power than men. Also, traditional rules stayed the same with the middle and higher classes for females. And lastly, agriculture was still an important factor of supporting the growing population. The US, after the war, was able to elevate their status due to the weakened Europeans after the war. Thus, US was becoming a major economic power and was able to avoid the destruction and losses of manpower that was associated. The war also catapulted US from being a debtor nation to a creditor one. Also, Woodrow Wilson's leading negotiation led America a big player on the world stage for the first time. The US at first was involved with war supplying foods and weapons. However, they didn't want their men to die in European conflicts. The population increased and their standard of lifestyle increased as the people's incomes increased.
Thank you for watching the Blop Show. I was Suji.
And I'm Jeff.